Welcome to another installment of Friday Q&A. I hope you've all had a great week. To everybody who submitted a question for this week's Q&A session, thank you very much. If you've got a question you would like me to answer on next week's video, simply put it in the comments section below. If you check the video description, you can find links to my Discord server, my free cabinet IRs, the music that I make with Ragdoll, and a link to my Patreon. Massive shout out to all my patrons who support what I do here on the channel. But for now, let's answer some questions. What's the story behind the band name Ragdoll? We actually named it after our drummer's cat, which was a Ragdoll cat breed. I feel like we had this long list of band names and we could get maybe 50% consensus max on the band name. And it wasn't until Cam just came in one day and he's like, I think I've got it, Ragdoll. And we all went, yeah, that's pretty decent. I feel like we went through a bunch of names, like taking Deep Purple album names or classic rock songs or something like that and trying to turn it into a band name. And we rejected all of those in favor of a fluffy, scruffy cat, which is a little bit ironic because so many people come up and say, Ragdoll, Aerosmith, do you guys play that song? And we don't, and we're totally not named after an Aerosmith song. We're named after a cat. I was sent a link by a user called the Cyber Mantis. Shout out Cyber Mantis. I really enjoy all the stuff you suggest to me. And this one was for a clip by Wagaki Band. The question is, do I like stuff like this or is it too different for me? I will admit that I am not super experienced with a lot of J-rock or J-pop style stuff, but hearing that clip was really, really enjoyable. And there's something about all the Japanese bands that I've been exposed to where the level of musicianship is just incredibly high. In fact, I was talking to my dad this week who has recently discovered the joys of YouTube, and he's been going down this rabbit hole of like J-funk and prog rock from the 70s in Japan and really, really enjoying it. And there's so much kind of versatility and musicianship, and it just seems like people are having fun in that clip, especially that Wagaki Band clip. I really enjoyed it. In fact, on my Discord server, there is an entire subthread devoted to J-rock and related genres on there. So if you want to come and expose me to some more stuff, come over to Discord and do that. I would love to hear it. My favorite John Sykes song, either with Thin Lizzy, Whitesnake, or Blue Murder. Ooh, this is a spicy one. The first time I heard John play was on the Thin Lizzy album, Thunder and Lightning, and obviously you've got Cold Sweat on there, but I think my favorite song on there is a song called This Is The One. Awesome, awesome track. I love that on there. Whitesnake, probably Bad Boys. There's just something about that riff and that entire song that just screams elite 80s intensity. But I would have to say my favorite John Sykes moment is just all of the song Valley of the Kings, including the music video where they're wearing those kind of sting pants and John is just wailing not only on guitar, but on vocals as well. And the Bad Boy Live album is very good as well if you want to hear John singing and playing some awesome Whitesnake songs. The new Polyphia and Steve Vai single sounds pretty much what I would expect Polyphia and Steve Vai to sound like. Steve was absolutely fantastic on it. And I had this little thought where if you think about when Passion and Warfare came out, so what was that, 1990, 91, something like that? So it's 32 years later and Steve still sounds like an alien. If you backdated 32 years before Passion and Warfare, you'd be looking at like the late 50s, the early 60s. So think about what people were doing with guitars and guitar sounds then. You had the Shadows, and you had, you know, the early Stone stuff, and you had like Chuck Berry and blues and rock and roll from the States. Imagine what it would have sounded like if Hank Marvin had guested on Passion and Warfare, and you know what it would have sounded like. I would probably actually really like that because I love Hank's playing. But yeah, it just goes to show that Steve continues to evolve and be relevant. And yeah, whether you like Polyphia or not, or whether you like Steve Vai or not, I would recommend you go check it out just to hear some very interesting and creative guitar playing. Any suggestions for a budget Thinline Telecaster? Now that I've actually played a few Harley Benton guitars, I'm pretty confident in saying that if you don't want to spend a lot of money and you want to get something pretty decent, go and grab one of those. I have a video with a little single cut junior coming out within the next week, and I did see that they released a Thinline Tele recently, so that would probably be my first suggestion. I actually don't know too much about the specifics about Thinline Teles and the history. I'm sure I can watch a bunch of videos on YouTube about them, but yeah, the Harley Benton stuff is always really, really good. I don't know if they do a Squire Classic Vibe or anything like that that's a Thinline Tele. If you've got a bit more budget to spend, and you can stretch for like a made in Mexico or a made in Japan telly, they're always going to be pretty consistent these days. My solution for using a model alive when I need to have a cabinet on stage, it's pretty simple. I've got a Matrix GT800 effects power amp. It's a pretty flat sounding and very powerful single rack space power amp. It's easy to chuck in with all the other gear if I know I need to use a cab. You would have seen me demo the Blackstar Amped 1, which works really, really well in that context as well. We've actually used the Matrix a whole bunch, using one side for guitar driving a guitar cab and the other side driving a bass cab with just a Sans amp into it, and that works really well. So I kind of like the Matrix in that context because it means we can run guitar through a cab and bass through a cab. I feel like if you're going to do one, you're probably going to want to do the other. How much time do I spend on the keyboard? I've got a Hydra synth over here, which you would have seen on the channel. I assume you're talking about that, noodling and creating parts. I tend to just play the exact same thing when I'm playing a keyboard, like play a really low A note, play a bunch of notes, hit the mod wheel a bit, and then play an F, then play a D, but then hit an F sharp in there so I get a D major chord and resolve it all back down to an A major chord because that sounds epic. Just trying to do Blade Runner stuff. So I tend to do a lot of the same stuff, but I do use it for creative ideas if I want to layer things, like when I'm making a backing track either for a demo or if we're doing some writing and some pre-production, just having sounds on there. I did play keyboards on Back to Zero, had this little Korg semi-modular synth that I used to make a bunch of noise, ran it through an Eventide H9. That was so much fun as like a textural device. But yeah, keyboard is more a switch my brain off and just enjoy the cool sounds 90% of the time kind of instrument. What other genres do I like to listen to? Pretty much all of them. I love rock and metal and progressive music and blues. That's probably the stuff that you hear the most on the channel. I'm a big ambient music fan. I love quirky pop stuff, like the new Björk single was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoy some of the kind of confessional female-fronted stuff from the late 80s, early 90s, like Suzanne Vega's Solitude Standing is one of my favorite albums of all time. And I guess the only genre that I don't listen to a whole lot of all the time would probably be jazz. I'm going to put on something to chill out. I'm probably going to listen to Sigur Rós more than I'm going to listen to some old jazz or something like that. But I do have a deep appreciation for all of this kind of stuff. There's really kind of two kinds of music, and I'm not talking about country and Western. I'm talking about good music and everything else. And what I think is good music doesn't necessarily map onto what somebody else is going to think is good music. That's kind of the point over there. And yeah, just stuff that I find interesting. It's such a vague answer. It sounds like a cop-out, but I definitely do not stick to genres when it comes to listening anymore. It's more about just hearing the elements that I like in music, which is either hearing something super creative sound, something really textural, great melodies, anything that I'm not listening to at the moment. There's probably going to be something that I am listening that's not in that little pocket. I think it's all about trying to keep your ears open. All right, a fairly spicy question next. Any bands that my wife likes that I'm not super into? We were actually talking about this last night and watching YouTube and watching some old clips of bands we used to love, and she was a massive My Chemical Romance fan, which I was not really into when all of that was happening. Again, this is stuff that I don't dislike it. It's just not things that I'm going to put on all the time. My wife also loves Ghost, and I like Ghost, but I wouldn't go to the point where I'm going to listen to them all the time. And, if we're in the car or something like that, she might put on a particular song, we'll listen to 2 or 3, and I'll be like, I just need to listen to something different for 1 or 2 more songs before we hear something else. But yeah, I probably drive her nuttier with the stuff that I like to listen to. And, she often has to sit in here with me in a guitar and drop C going jug, 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 twisting a knob, jug, 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 twisting a knob for hours and hours on end. So yeah, it's probably more the other way around in our case. That is all that I have time for this week. I'm about to run off to a gig. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend and you find some time to play some guitar and make some glorious noises. If you've got any questions for next week, put it in the comment section below. If I didn't get to one of your questions, do not hesitate to ask it again. I'll do my best to get to it next week. I will be down at the Strings Attached Guitar Festival in Margaret River next weekend. I'm doing some workshops. Ragdoll are playing at Settlers Tavern on the Friday night to open the festival. It should be a bunch of fun, and you will see some videos from it soon enough. Have a great weekend. See you next time.